Right, good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of the English Way podcast. This morning, I have the wonderful pleasure of having Nick Buckley, MBE, on this morning, and we're going to talk all things America, all things his new book. Let's have a look. The excellent England, My England, The Death and Resurrection of the Greatest Country to Ever Exist, which is really, really good. And then we're just going to talk about where we go from here. So good morning, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for the invite.
No, I think I've been angling for this for a while. I think at one point we were going to try and meet up for drinks over the summer, weren't we?
Yeah.
So it's
anybody
nice.
who invites me onto a podcast, 99% of the time I say yeah. So if you're watching this and you've got a podcast, that more than likely I'd come on it.
You know, I think that's a really interesting point that there's something somebody said years ago about the US, when the US was going through probably a comparatively similar place to where we are now, about 8 years ago, and they said we either hang together or we hang. And I think there's something in that we either all start getting behind each other, or the thing, it all just starts to fall apart, doesn't it? And I think we're a broad church. It's like a wheel with 1,000 spokes, and there's all these things on the spokes coalescing towards this. And it doesn't matter what spoke. It literally doesn't matter what spoke you're on. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're a turf. It doesn't matter whether you're a beauty model. It doesn't matter whether you're a rock singer. It doesn't matter. We're all going to this thing where we just want a free world.
Yeah, I'd go one step further and say, I'm quite happy to talk with people who completely disagree with me, who want a different vision of the world than what I want. Because it's only through discussion, it's only through those conversations can I try to get to the truth. Because that's a journey I'm on. I'm not on a journey to be proven right. I'm on a journey to try to seek out the truth. And I know from my starting position, I'll be wrong in almost everything I think. And the reason why I know that is because history teaches us this. Every scientist, every amazing person ever to exist in the world, over time has been proven to be wrong on almost everything they thought. I'm not special, so I know for a fact I'm probably wrong in many things I think. And it's only through discussion can I discover those things.
Well, that's a mark of humility, which I think strikes through everything I've ever seen with you. You're very forthright. So you're very northern, what I call northern logic. Spade's a spade, right? We don't dress it up. It is what it is up here. But you're also very humble, and I think your life experience has shown that you've seen enough of both sides of the track. It's like I always say that no one starts out that way. Like, there's goodness within everyone. There's this excellent phrase from the East that there's two phrases. It's one that the Buddha only looks at your heart. So what you call yourself is irrelevant. It's what's in there. But also that the Buddha only needs one good thought. So you only need to have, and from that one good thought, everything can grow back. And I think what has happened in the West, particularly with the left, is essentially hijacking of people's natural compassion. And it pushes them into a corner of, because of the dialectic nature of Marxism, it pushes them into a corner where that compassion is like, well, the only way I can protect everything is to fight. And I have to fight against this thing because this thing, in my view now, is uncompassionate. But it's not. It's kind of fake. It's like, would you rather the tree grew straight or it grew crooked? Because if it grows straight, you got to tie it to a straight stick. And it's got to make it grow straight. But then when it's straight and tall, it's glorious and offers shelter and protection and all of these other things. So it's like, yeah, we've kind of got to unravel this easy pathway.
We do, and I've spent decades looking at this. So I've spent decades working with young people involved in crime and antisocial behaviour, and decades working with rough sleepers who are mentally ill, drug addicts, life of crime. And people say to me, why did you bother, Nick? Why did you bother? You have more failures than successes, which is completely true. And my answer always is, well, when you speak to those people, there's always something good about them. They've made loads of mistakes and they've rejected their own personal responsibility. That's why they're in the mess they're in. So I don't make excuses for people. But when you speak to those individuals, they're individuals, they're people, they're someone's son, someone's daughter. And when you unpick their lives, there's things they're good at, the things they want for themselves and for their family. And I've spent my life, my adult life, trying to help those people get the life they want. but they just don't know how to get it. And usually they're so damaged by things that have happened in the past, they don't think they can get it, and most of them think they don't deserve to have it in the first place. So there's good and there's value in every single one of us, even if we keep messing it up.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone's... I would argue that there are probably an incredibly tiny number of people in the world who I would consider worthless. It's like, well, there's just no point. Like, they're so evil, there's just no point. They can't come back. And I think everyone has that kind of opportunity. And I think what worries me about what's happening now is there appears to be a split occurring between literally the moral and the immoral. And it's like it's getting harder to bridge the chasm, as it were. So the homeless thing's interesting. How did you get into that? Because that's how I know you. I know you from the rough sleeping stuff and what you did on knife crime. And then you kind of moved into a lot of other things after that, which were awesome.
So most of my life has been a series of consequences, good luck, fortune, and just mishaps. I got involved in rough sleeping because I worked for Manchester Council. I was promoted and got the job in charge of Manchester City Centre in terms of reducing crime and antisocial behaviour. And under that remit came rough sleeping, street drinking, and there was something else to do with rough sleeping. I forgot what it was now. And that was my first introduction to rough sleeping. I chaired a multi-agency panel with the NHS, the police, the council, lots of services about how we're going to address these individuals. How do we stop them offending, causing problems, ruining the city's reputation? And at that point, 20 years ago, there was something like 17 people sleeping rough in Manchester. Let me say that again, 17. At the moment, there's a couple of hundred now in Manchester city centre, a couple of hundred. There was 17 when I ran the city centre. That's how bad this situation's become. And that was my introduction. And then when I left the council, I set a charity up working with kids to stop them getting involved in crime. And then a few years later, I decided to expand and create a new project running alongside that in the charity to work with rough sleepers in the city centre to get them into accommodation, because the services we had weren't good enough. It was all about, this is what we can do to you. There was no customer service. There was none of this. What would you like? Because you need a choice. This is your life. It was all about, this is what we can do. Do you want it? No. Okay, bye-bye. That doesn't solve anything. And we're paying for these services through our tax money. And these services were almost useless. So I set a project up, and in the first year, or not the first year, in about the third year, we got 44 people off the street into accommodation in 1 year on a budget of £20,000.
So it can be
so
done.
This problem's easy to clear up if you have the right mindset. If you're not worried about being called, we used to get hashtag nasty charity because we weren't taking anyone's BS about why they're on the streets. It's not my fault. It's social services. It's this. It's like we need to start off with the truth. The truth is that it is your fault, isn't it? And we'd have discussions and end up making them see and understand that it was their fault for making a series of poor choices. And once you can get them to understand that, offering them help and getting them help and making sure they want to accept that help, it's a lot easier. But you can't get people to take help if you encourage them to live in unreality.
So that mindset runs through your book. Now, I'm only a few chapters in, but it's incredibly straight talking. There's no nonsense. There's no waffling about how Gramsci or Foucault got their ideas. It goes, this was put in, and this was the result. Go and sort it out. You're a bloke, take it on the chin and fix it. And what I'm interested in is there's an incredible, it's almost like a steeled approach. And I tried to get through this with Bo from the law to see this, because he's similar.
Yeah.
What formed that mind? Because it's not common in today's world to have such a cast iron mindset.
Like many things, I think it's your personal history. So let's start off with my childhood, single parent household. I have no memory of my dad. We left when I was 2. We died when I was 6 or 7. Never met the man, have no memories. Brought up on a failing council estate in South Manchester called the Anton Estate, which is notorious for drugs, gangs, shootings. It wasn't that bad when I was a kid in the 70s. But it was still terrible in the 70s compared to other estates. Went to a failing school. And through the 70s and 80s, victimhood culture hadn't really taken off. It was still, you still got told to pull yourself up by, your shoelaces, push yourself down, try again. So I had a lot of that, but that was creeping in at the time. And when I was growing up, I had a really bad stutter, if you can believe it or not. I mean, I never shut up now. It's very hard to believe. Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, I stopped stuttering at about 13. I didn't stutter in front of my friends or close family. It was anyone I didn't know, or if I was under pressure or stress, like standing up in class and reading in English. I write it in one of my books. We read the book, The Hobbit, and every time I think of Bilbo Baggins, makes me smile because I used to have to read the word Bilbo, and I would know the next word is Baggins, and I knew it was another B, and I'd go and that was terrible in school, and I was the butt of every joke. And through that, I learnt to always be the first person to take the mickey out of me. Because if I took the mickey out of me, it left you with no power. You couldn't hurt me then. You couldn't make me the butt of a joke because I was taking the mickey out of me. So that was the first defence I learnt. And then through my late teens and 20s, I lost my way. Mainly because I didn't have a father, I had no instruction, I had nobody showing me how to be a man in the world, how to achieve what you want. I had loads of ideas, loads of ambition, but didn't know how to put it into practice. I was waiting for someone to knock on my door and give me the opportunities I deserved. And I got to 30 and realised, this isn't happening, is it? No one's knocking on my door. So I got my first proper job at 30. Up to that point, I was wheeling, dealing, self-employed, working on markets, doing a bit of wholesaling. But I got my first proper job at 30, working at Manchester Airport, and my life changed almost overnight. I had purpose, I had structure, I had a poor wage, but it was regular. All my wages before used to be good wages sometimes, but I wouldn't get paid for 2-3 months. So this was a regular poor wage. And then my life really changed when I started working at the council, working with young people. And I fell into that job by accident. I only took the job because it was twice the money I was already on. And that's the reason why I took the job. And suddenly I found something that I excelled at, that I was excellent at, that I was better than the people already doing the job. And the reason why I was better is because I was one of those kids we were speaking to. I wasn't a university-educated, white, liberal woman from down south who now lives in Manchester saying to these young people, oh, it's a shame. I know you're from a single-parent household, and oh, it's a shame, isn't it? And I know the world's against you, but if you can just try harder at school, and if you can just stop getting into trouble, your life will... And I was like, I'm not saying those things. So I would sit down with these young people and go, right, no, stop with your excuses. It's all BS, mate. No, I'm having none of that. You did those things because you decided to do those things, didn't you? And you know what we're going to do? We're going to penalise your mum now because of your behaviour at 14 years old. So how does that feel? You think you're a man and you're the man of the house. Your behaviour now is going to penalise your mum because I'm going to give your mum a warning on her property. And if she gets more warnings, she'll end up being evicted and you and your sister will be homeless. And it'll all be down to you at 14 years old. And you think you're the man of the house, do you? And I gave them personal responsibility and I told them how it was going to be. And I didn't sugarcoat it. And I did it out of love. I wanted those young people to be successful. I wanted those young people to have a better life. And sometimes you don't get that by being pink and fluffy. You get it through something I call tough love. And it's telling people how the world is. And it's telling people how reality is. And you're not going to change reality. And you're not going to fight the system because no one can beat the system. If you're going to go up against the system, you're going to lose. And you're going to lose bad. It'll ruin your life. And I'm telling you now, you won't beat the system. You need to be part of the system and use the system to your own benefit. that's what you need to do. And they're the conversations I used to have with thousands of young people, and to put them back on the straight and narrow and make sure they understood consequences. So I wasn't a white liberal woman going, "Oh, would you like a McDonald's? Because you've been a good boy there." And it's like, no, you didn't get any of that from me. And it worked.
Yeah, it does. It's I think we fell into essentially a feeling economy that just it fails, because children at that age they're very good at avoiding pressure. So if you give them an out, they'll take it. So if you're being all feely and touchy and this, they will know, oh, hang on, I can gain ground here, I can scroll. But if you come down and say, no, this is the way it is, these are the lines, this is the line in the sand, you're either on this side or this side, but if you're on that side, there's consequences. If you're on this side, there's rewards. Which one do you want? And they'll sit and think about it, and it's giving them that ability to go, look, you're forming an adult brain, I can see it, now act like an adult. What choices do you want? And you'll see them go, oh, well, I'd rather have that. And you're like, okay, let's go then. Let's go and do that. Let's take you down this way. And it does. It has a huge impact. The amount of kids I've spoke to and pulled out and got on apprenticeships and things like that, just from sitting down and saying, well, where do you think this is going to head? Where do you think it's going to end? Because if you carry on like this, you're kind of screwed. But you lived it. You've lived that life.
To a certain extent, yeah. Oh, well, some of my friends definitely do. Some of my friends are dead. Yeah. Some of my friends have been in jail. One of my friends, when we were teenagers, was caught under a motorway bypass, high on drugs, with 2 loaded pistols in his pockets. Where he got them from? We weren't close friends at that time, but that was some of the directions my friends took.
Yeah, I remember being in rooms where my life could have went in that direction and just went, no, this isn't for me. But then I had I come from a large kind of immigrant Irish Catholic family around me. So there was always my uncles. Even when my father worked away a lot, there was always my uncles to give me a clip around the ear if I got things wrong, And I think it's just important. We'll come back to your book in a bit. I want to, something happened the other day. A very, very small thing happened. And I think it's metaphorically spun the world on its axis, a very insignificant event called the US election. So I want to talk to you about that, why you think he won, but why, what do you think the ramifications are going to be, not only globally, but I think for the UK, it's almost like everyone has just breathed a sigh of relief. And just what your thoughts are.
Yeah. First of all, you don't have to like Trump to want Trump to be president. If you're given a choice between being shot in the head and stabbed in the shoulder, well, there is no third option of not being assaulted. So you'll take being stabbed in the shoulder. So sometimes you need to pick the worst of 2 bad options. So Trump isn't perfect, and we know that. But our world, the Western world, is dying. And I write about it in my book. We're dying. We've been dying for decades and decades and decades, and nobody wants to do anything about it because it's too difficult. Because our political cycle is only 4 years. So therefore, let's kick the problem down the road. Someone else can deal with this. I just want to be elected again. So I'm going to spend my time doing silly, stupid things that look good, that will get me elected. I'm not going to tackle problems that need 20, 30 years to solve, because someone else is going to take the benefits for all my hard work today. Now, will Trump be better or worse for the world? Well, the truthful answer is we don't know. But what I do know is he's going to tip the table upside down, and he's going to see where the chips fall. And at the moment, we're going down the wrong path, and the world's failing. So we're already failing, so let's tip the table upside down and let's see if we can improve it. And I think he will improve certain things. The first thing I like about Trump is his unashamedly pro-America stance. Make America great again. Make America great again. That's what I like about Trump. Not because I love America, to be fair. It's in my top 10 countries of our friends, of our colleagues, of our military strength. Yeah, of course I want America to do well, but I'm not a big supporter of America. I only support England and the UK. But if I want us all, I want every country to put their citizens first. And that's what we've lost in the West. We elect governments now who want to be politicians of the world. I don't elect my local politician or my MP or contribute to whoever's going to be Prime Minister in this country to help the world. I want them to help the UK. Sometimes helping the world can benefit the UK. I get that. But it should always be, is this going to benefit England and the UK? And Trump's going to do that with America. And we will learn from that. And we will see America. If he's correct, he may be wrong. But if he's correct in this, America will go from strength to strength. And we can look across the Atlantic and go, we want some of that. Our politicians need to do that. He's going to end some of the woke nonsense by banning men entering women's changing rooms and sports. He's going to end that illegal mass migration across the border. And that's what he's saying he's going to do. Let's wait to see if he does it. But if he does those things, we're going to look at that in Western Europe and go, well, we want some of that. So he could be a beacon of hope.
I think so. I think the one thing about Trump is he always goes and does, at least he attempts to do what he says he's going to do. And I think that's what frightened everybody, because there was a lot of people who went, well, I don't like him, but I know where I stand, because everything he says he's already gone out and done. So I think he'll definitely give it all a go. I don't think he's a liar. But whether he succeeds or not depends what he's up against. It depends. I think last time he was just very naive to how the political machine worked. But I've read his book. He's going to go scorched earth, man. He's going to go scorched earth.
He absolutely is.
It's going to be glorious, but it's going to be like, wow. And I do think it's going to flip the world upside down. It needs flipped upside down, because something seriously has gone awry since the war. It's really gone awry. It's bad. It's like you look at the war and they tell you, oh, the Allies won. But you look at it properly, Marxism won that war, because that's what happened. You know, they installed Marxist governments all around the world immediately after. They installed them into education, into history, everything. And that's what's won. It needs to end. And I think I predicted this years ago. They'll call it Trumponomics, right? You'll reinvigorate the economy by going, look, have a low tax economy like England used to have, so that there's more wealth in the hands of more. So there's a statistic that 100 years ago, 90% of the wealth was in 10% of the population. Now it's 99% of the wealth and 1% of the population. And that's largely got to do with the basis Marxist banking policies that we've adopted. And it all needs overturned. And I think Milei's kind of shed a light on that in Argentina. I think Trump wanted that in his last term, but he kind of pussyfooted around a little bit with the Fed. I think he'll push the Fed, fold it back into the US Treasury. And I think America will be back on the gold by 2030. But I do think England's got a bit of a fight. We haven't laid the groundwork. We haven't done the hard work here like they did in America. Like, Trump didn't get in 2016 because he started campaigning in 2015. Trump got in 2016 because in 2002, the patriots and Christians started doing the work then to try and change it all so that in 10, 15 years' time, somebody could come in. You know, it's equivalent to, like, if Farage gets in the next 5 years, it's actually because of the foundation that he started with UKIP back in 2012, right? Yeah. It takes that long. So there's no quick answer, but we can't be sitting here going, the orange man's in all of our problems. He's good. Trump, can you fix this for us? Can you fix it? What the hell are the English going to fix for ourselves?
Absolutely. Hence why I talk about in the book, this needs fixing by Englishmen and Englishwomen. That's how we fix England. No one else is going to. We've been waiting for decades for someone to fix our problems. Just like me waiting for that knock on a door to offer me a job and offer me a better life. That knock will never come.
Yeah, and I think I remember, so I used to think, the Irish side of my family had been here 100 years, right? My nana had an Irish accent because her parents were Irish. So I have a little lilt in my accent that's slightly Irish. And I used to think, oh yeah, I'm half Irish, I sat down with a kid in Belfast about a year ago, 18 months ago. We had a conversation. I come away from that. Now, he came from like 20 miles from where my family's from, right? And I walked away, I'm not Irish. I'm an Englishman through and through, and I can only speak for the English. And I think it is true that, you have to be English to be able to fix English. Like, I don't understand the passion about haggis, but I understand why you want to roll a cheese down a hill. I totally get that. So it has to be fixed by us. And I think America can give us a lot of hope. And I think, what he announced this morning about the year-long centenary festival and the 250-year festival, the world fairs. These are things that the English used to do in England, right? So it's all gone. This appetite for celebrating Englishness is gone. And you go, hang on, in the last 1,500 years since the collapse of Rome, it's all been about England. It isn't about any other country. America hasn't done it yet. America's had 50 years, 70 years. They have yet to reach the height and zenith of sophistication and culture that England did. Now, I think they're going to, but it's still England's history. It's still about England. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Get off your bloody knees.
Yeah.
If
America does get to that zenith, if America does get to that zenith, America is a child of the English.
Yes, yeah. It's part of the Anglo story. It's like, look, it basically, this starts and ends with the Germanics marching on Rome. They're our kin. It starts and ends with that. This is the Anglo story. And I look forward to seeing what he does. But two questions. Why do you think he won, and why do you think they all got it so wrong?
Let's start with why they got it wrong first. That's an easy one. That's because every institution, and it goes to this country, every institution, all the mainstream media, all the celebrities, everyone who's in any position of power are all left-wing. And all their friends are left-wing. And all the ideologies you have to believe in are all left-wing. And you're in, that we all are to some extent. We're in echo chambers. And they're only speaking to people who think like them. And they then think the whole world, the whole country thinks like them. And we know that isn't true. They keep looking at the polling and keep tweaking how they speak to people on the phone and the internet and trying to get a more accurate depiction of what's going on. And these polling companies are really trying to do that because that's their business at the end of the day. If they keep failing, I mean, nobody will then commission polling companies. So it's not like they're doing this on purpose. I think they really are trying to get it right. They just don't know how to. And some of the other factors is there is a social shame about voting to the right. That's why no one predicted Brexit. That's why no one predicted how well the Reform Party was going to do at the election, and same with voting for Trump. No, you speak to people and they'll go, oh, yeah, I'm voting for this. But deep down inside, they're going, no, I'm voting that way. I just don't want to tell you who I'm voting for in case you look down upon me. So there's a lot of that going on. But then why did he win? I think the answer is blaringly obvious. America, just like the Western world, is failing. And people can see it every day in their everyday lives. They can see more and more migrants in their neighborhoods. And, you can argue that, some migrants may be beneficial and stuff like that. You can make those arguments. But nobody wants 2 billion migrants turning up in their country. So everyone's got a cut-off point. And for most people, that cut-off point's been reached many years ago. They've looked at crime. Crime's out of control in America, in this country, across the West, especially when it's migrant crime as well. We're looking at the children of migrants committing more crime. We're looking at knife crime, robbery. We're looking at the fact that nobody will intervene when a crime's being committed now because they're scared of being stabbed or shot. In America, you're scared of being arrested. We've got people who broke up crimes and have been arrested. There's a guy in New York at the moment on charge for murder because he intervened with some crazy black guy on the subway who then died. He's been charged with murder. He's a vet. So people are looking at all that. People are looking at the cost of everything. Price of food's going up. Why is it going up? All the regulations and the bureaucracy and everything they've got to do. Look at transport costs and the cost of petrol, especially in this country. America now produces most of its energy and exports energy as well. We could do that, but we don't.
Yeah, we could, yeah.
Yeah, you look at the craziness over net zero. You're looking at all the woke agenda. I'm a woman if I want to be a woman, so it means I can shower with your 15-year-old girl. And people are looking at this and going, am I in a nightmare? If we don't know what a man and a woman is, then society's failing. And then we're looking at what society does. We promote all our females now as whores. We over-feminize men as if they are women or inferior versions of women. We create an environment now where our children are in danger danger from strangers, danger from parents, and danger from themselves around gender ideology, around over-sexualizing them, from all these things. And the average voter is going, this is what I want. And Trump might not be what I want, but I don't want what we've got now. And that's at the heart of a democracy, is when you don't like your government, you can have a change. Doesn't mean the change is going to be good. It just means you can have a change to see if that's any better. And if that's no better, have another change.
So I think you're spot on. And I do think things have reached a point where I think even the CEO of BlackRock probably recognized, hang on, I can't bankroll stuffing the ballot boxes this time because they'll have me swinging from a lamppost. It's that bad. So I think that testaments, look, what do they call it? They call it the blob. That's the government, and the mob is us. You go back 150 years ago, if a politician in England was failing at their job, they'd come and they'd string him up outside of a lamppost. If he really did something that bad, they would come down to his house and pull him out, and they would have him. And not that I'm condoning that, but I think one of the worst things that ever happened in England was the discouragement of what they classed as vigilante behaviour in the 90s. And I think that allowed like a vacuum for the ne'er-do-wells essentially to fill, because they flooded the press with stories of people who were tackling burglars in their own homes, who were running paedophiles out of town and saying, oh, this is wrong, you shouldn't do this. And they basically discouraged that. Well, all the men took a step, went, all right, because the English are quite reasonable. And we just went, oh, okay, right, all right, yeah, I see your point. And they took a step back. Well, all that happened was the vacuum was filled. And I think that has reached a zenith in America where they're like, enough is enough. This is beyond what we can do at the community level. We can do it at the community level, but it won't stop. So we need it to come from the top. And I think England's probably we're at a similar crossroads. But what we failed to overcome off the last election, which America has probably overcome in the last 3, is the voter apathy. And I think, I called this the day after the election here, on July 5th, Labour has 18% and it's fell since then. So they probably got 15%, maybe even 12% support in the country. The mandate is paper thin. It's paper mandate only. It's not a spiritual mandate of the people.
Yeah, they won by default.
They won by default, absolutely. And the north of England, if you combined the Reform and Tory vote, well, the north of England lead centre-right because they easily outgunned Labour in the north. But when you looked at 43% of the country or whatever it was didn't vote. Now, you're never going to get 100% unless you're the Democrat. You're never going to get 100% turnout. You're going to get, 70%, 80% at best. What do we need to do in this country to imbue that enthusiasm to overcome this apathy? Because it's not just about Nigel, because Nigel came in and he did remarkably well, but still millions upon millions of people just didn't even bother.
And that's because it hasn't got bad enough yet for those people to care. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
My life is fairly okay, as in that's what people are thinking. I'm on benefits. It's better than working. I've got Coronation Street. I've got Sky TV, and I can afford some beer from the shop. Life is crap, and I know my life's fairly crap, but it's not crap enough yet to make me want a revolution, to make me get off my armchair and get on the streets and march. Hence that's why we've become a socialist state. That's why we have a welfare system. It's a bit like the circuses and giving out bread at in Rome 2,000 years ago. It's to quell the violence in the people. So we give them circuses, which is entertainment, which we do now. And we give him bread, which is our welfare state. So we just copied what the Romans did to keep the people under control. What's going to change it for them? Well, the first thing is what I've been told about for decades, is personal responsibility. It's those people to realise that your life could be better, and your life will start getting better the second you realise, the second you want to be in charge of your own life. Your life will get better then. I would rather this country, and I'd rather we're all poorer if we're all in control of our lives and our country. I'd rather be poorer, because I know being poorer is only a temporary state. Because I know once we take responsibility and we start looking out for ourselves, our neighbours, our community, our country, we will become successful again. But having everything run by the state is just an example from the Soviet Union. Nothing will ever get better. It's just a slow decline that we can't see. So we need people to take on that responsibility and to have that British dream, that English dream of wanting to conquer the world again, wanting to be the greatest, wanting to create new science and new medicines and be better than the French. And that's why we have this, I believe it's genetic anti-tribe rhetoric sometimes. That's why we hate the French and the Germans. That's why the people in Manchester dislike Scousers in Liverpool. That's why we called everyone down south soft Southerners, because there's that tribal thing of wanting to be the best. And we need to start proving to ourselves and the rest of the world that we are the best. And to do that, people then may start going out and voting. But we've got to make their lives more uncomfortable. And if I became Prime Minister, I would slash benefit system. I don't want people in poverty, because I've been fighting against poverty all my life. I don't want people in poverty. I just want to make sure that if you take a handout from the state, it's not a handout, it's a hand up, and you will be held responsible. And it will not be comfortable living on handouts and hand ups. It will be hard work, and your children will see how much you struggle, and they'll be saying to themselves, I'm not living like that when I'm an adult. But we don't. We make benefits so comfortable that it's not become a safety net anymore now. It's become a hammock. It's become a destination people aim to get to, is a life on benefits. And people say, you're making all this up, Nick. I've worked with people like this for 20, 30 years. People in my family are like this. You know, people I know, some of my friends are like this. Doesn't make them bad people. But if we give people choices and they take one of those choices because it's better for them, well, we can't complain that they took a choice that was legal. We just need to make these things harder, and we need to give people that kick up the arse for them to want to improve their own lives. And that involves slashing taxes.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the Magna Carta, it says it's illegal to tax an Englishman on his income, and I think that still stands. I think that's 100% true. It was classed as a sin in Rome and in Greece, and up until 17 something or other, it was illegal in England. Yep. And I think what Trump's going to do...
Income tax was a temporary tax.
Yeah,
was brought in to fight Napoleon. It was temporary tax.
Yep, and it's renewed. It keeps getting renewed. That's the other thing. And I think Trump will blow that lid off that in the US and show that you don't need it. If you function, you look at Petra. Petra made its money on essentially import and excise duties, and it was one of the richest places in the world while it functioned. England did the same. You need to produce, and we're not producing. I mean, I think we can't escape but sliding into your book here. This is all kind of segueing because such a good book. When I hold it up again here, book. This is very, very good. Go and buy your book. Go and leave a review, because the lefties have bombed the review section. Go and leave a review. This is very good.
Book, online. They've attacked online. You know, you can tell they've not read it because
yes, I know.
Because they're not verified purchasers, and they're talking about things that are not even in the book.
I know. But it is a very good book. I would recommend everyone go and buy it and read it. And I think everything's functioning wrong. And the big thing is what you hit on in your book. And I'd like to ask you why you wrote your book in a second, but the big thing is about personal responsibility. And there's no personal responsibility with the government, which is why I prefer monarchy. England is not a democracy, it's a constitutional monarchy. And people need to remember that the monarch is supposed to function in a fashion that makes sure that the long-term responsibility is held by the monarch, so the parliament is making the correct decisions on behalf of the people. Since the war, that hasn't functioned. And that's a bigger discussion that needs to be had, because the monarchy is supposed to be there to protect us from parliament. Parliament is supposed to be there to protect us from monarchy. They're supposed to create this balance. And the House of Lords is there to essentially protect us from them both. And it hasn't. And, the thing about you wouldn't mind being poorer. We are poor. The GDP per capita in England is astonishingly poor, and people don't realise. 30 years ago, I had more money in my pocket as a bartender on $2.35 an hour than what I do now, right? And the minimum wage is an accumulative tax hike. That's all it is. It's a tax con. You don't get any extra money. It's a compound interest scam. I've worked in the production chain from the supplier all the way through. By the time everyone puts their 8% on, plus their profit, by the time it gets to you at the end result, I've been in a restaurant, I am the end result, the price is through the roof. And if we charge people what we're supposed to charge, we couldn't afford it. So it is a tax scam. We need to realize that we're not wealthy, that gimmicks like minimum wage are essentially election buying gimmicks. It's bribery. It doesn't work. And we need to reduce the tax burden across the board. I think for the next 10 years, income tax needs to be 10%. I think corporation tax needs to be 10%. I think benefits, yes, it should be uncomfortable. Gordon Brown did a very bad thing there. You can now make more money on benefit than you can working full time, which is insane. It was supposed to be a help over. It was the Jarrow marches that kind of pushed everyone into that position. It was a help over. It was supposed to help through the most egregious of times. My wife works in this system, and she'll tell me that there's people who ring up and quite proudly claim that 3 generations of their family have never worked a day in their life. And that's just not good. It's not good for your self-esteem. It's not good for your mind. It's not good for your body. It's not good for your spiritual worth. You're leeching off your own country. So I feel like every road here points to Rome, and Rome being your book. Why did you write this? You could have just sat back on your council wage and, anything you've done in the last few years, you didn't have to do. But this book in particular, why did you write it?
The idea of the book came a few days after the Southport stabbings, and then the demonstrations on the streets. That's when I said, right, things have changed in this country now. People are on the streets. People are angry. When they killed and blew up 22 kids on my street in Manchester city centre 7 years ago, no one did anything. We got together and we all sang Don't Look Back in Anger. But 3 kids are stabbed to death in Southport. The country's changed now, and people were angry and demanded change. And I thought, this is the time to write that book. And I wrote it for a particular audience. I wrote the book, it's for anybody to read. But I've had some people ask me, why is it called England, My England? Why is it not called Great Britain, My Great Britain? And I answer that on the first page, first introduction. It's because I'm English. United Kingdom, Great Britain's 4 countries. And those countries are for those people in those countries to save. It's not for me as an Englishman to save Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland or even the Union, because in Scotland, almost half the people in Scotland wanted to leave the Union a few years ago. So how can I save the Union when half the Scots don't want to save it? In Wales, 25% of people in Wales want to go it alone and leave the United Kingdom. So how can I save Wales when a quarter of the population don't want to save it? And same with Northern Ireland. A third of the people in Northern Ireland actually want to join a foreign country. So I need to start with England, and then we can save the United Kingdom, or England can leave the United Kingdom and go it alone. I also wrote it for the many men, Englishmen, who contact me online and say things like, thanks for doing that post, Nick. Thanks for writing that article. I agree with you, but there's nothing I can do. And I go, well, there's lots of things you can do. Yeah, but you don't understand. I'm married, I've got a wife, I've got a mortgage, I've got kids. There's nothing I can do, so I just stay quiet. And the answer is, well, stay quiet, but you need to understand you're a coward. That's a definition of a coward, knowing you should be doing something and you're too afraid to do it. That's a definition of a coward. And we need Englishmen to find a backbone and not do things stupid. Not to purposely lose your job working for a multinational because suddenly you're not going to put your pronouns in your bio. If they force you to do it, then you do it. But doing nothing is not an option anymore. And we've got too many English people, men and women, who do nothing and just say, there's nothing we can do. The country's over. The country's finished. I'm looking at moving to Cyprus or to Poland. And my answer is, you're part of the problem. 1 minute you're complaining about immigrants coming here, and the next breath you're telling me you're going to become an immigrant and go somewhere else. So we criticise these illegal immigrants for abandoning their own country, their family, their friends, and coming here illegally and not taking responsibility for their homeland. And you're going to do exactly the same thing. abandon your homeland and run away like a coward. And these are difficult things to say to people, but I'm tired of listening to cowards, so I tell them now, you're a coward, you're part of the problem. And I couldn't write a book about that. I couldn't write a book called You're a Coward. Nobody would buy it. So I've had to tone the language down a little bit and write a little bit more sensibly and try to explain to people why we're in this mess and what they can do as an individual, not creating a new political party, not doing all these wonderful things that would help, but what can you do as just an individual living in England? And that's what the last chapter is really about, because if we start doing stuff, things will change.
No, I agree. And no, you couldn't write a book called You're a Coward and You're Part of the Problem, but Morrissey could write a song about it. He could definitely do that. No, I think you're spot on. It's like, I've had lots of offers over the years to go and work in other countries, and it's like, I can't leave my people. Like, it's not, like, if I leave, then it just feels like I'm abdicating some responsibility that's very deeply held. Like, I can't describe it. And
what would we have done in 1939-40 if all the decent Englishmen all ran away to Canada and America?
Exactly. But the thing is, it's worse than that. What we're facing now is even worse than that. There was a reason when the communists came that the Poles turned around and ran back towards the Germans. Because it's worse. What we're facing is something that's worse than that. And I do think we do have to step up. And there's lots you can do. There's a guy called Scott Mannion. I don't know if you're aware of Scott Mannion. He's a former film producer, worked on several Hollywood films. Really, really lovely guy. I had an excellent chat with him a few months ago. And he's pretty much got into like the metaphysics of being English. It's remarkable stuff that he talks about. And it's like deeper than Tolkien, right? And he was, in one of his earlier episodes, he was talking about the phrase an Englishman's home and his castle. And he said it's mistranslated. It's not an Englishman's home is his castle. It comes from a northern expression, which means the Englishman is the sheriff in his hometown. And this is the thing. You're supposed to rectify the world around you. As you move through the world, as an Englishman, you're supposed to put things right. And it's not just opening doors and pulling out chairs and things like that. It's going, whoa, stop that, sit down. It's about putting the world into order as you go through. And this is what the English did. There's this remarkable insight that I had. I was like, well, I spent years meditating on, well, why are the English here? What is our purpose, right? And it was to create, what I came to the conclusion was that it's Jerusalem. It's to create the divine in the world. It's to bring the divine order down into the physical realm, right? And this is what Blake hit on. Blake got this. Jerusalem, I think, is the most important text in the entirety of the English canon, because in those 8 lines or whatever it is, he completely nails the whole purpose of being English. I will not rest until Jerusalem is born in this green and pleasant land. And that's the purpose of the English. That's why we went out forth into the world. You go, well, how do they do that? Well, they do that through creating peace, because peace creates prosperity, which creates building, which allows you to organize the world and structure it in such a way that this divine manifestation can occur. How do you get the peace? You have to fight for it. It's like, so how do you fight for it? You go to war. And then after that, and this is what we did. The empire was one of the greatest things that's ever been created. And I'm an adult enough to realize that you cannot have the good without the smooth. Everything is at best 50-50 positive and negative. The empire was more positive than negative, but there's always going to be negatives, because this is the real world. It's not Hollywood. It's not fantasy. It's not some woke Marvel interpretation. This is the real world. Terrible things are going to happen. That's just how life is. Life is terrible. Life is unfair. It's harsh. It's brutal. You've got to get on with it. But as Englishmen, we have this destiny. We have this birthright to claim that we are here to help set the world in order. And you don't need to be Farage. You don't even need to be a Carl Benjamin, right? Yeah. You can do it in your hometown. When the kids are messing up in the corner shop, oi, stop it. When someone,
the reason why we don't do that anymore is because we live in a socialist state.
Yeah.
It's the state's job to sort this out. It's the state's job to look after my mum because she's old. It's the state's job to teach those kids some manners. It's the state's job to clean my street. It's the state's job. And it has to be the state's job because I'm paying so much tax. I need my money's worth out of the services. This is what happens in this socialist state. And then talking about it's an Englishman's duty. Let me give you two examples. It was Englishmen who decided slavery is wrong and we're going to end slavery across the world. We may have engaged in slavery, but so did every country on every continent and every people and every tribe throughout the history of mankind. But it was Englishmen and women who said, this is wrong and we're going to stop this. And then another example would be when we ran India, we looked at sati, which is the burning of widows with their dead husbands, and we went, this is wrong and we're going to stop this. We got nothing out of that. In fact, I would imagine we upset most people in India by banning it. And there was no financial gain on it. In fact, it was a risk that we could lose India over something like that. But we turned around and said, no, this is wrong. That's what the English do. That's what the empire did around the world. They made the world a better place. And they made those countries and gave them, or put them on the first step to being modern countries.
Well, we did more for women's rights in India than any Indian ever has. That's the truth. And the people don't understand the level of satanic worship we encountered when we went out around, the level of cannibalism, the level of human sacrifice, and we stamped it all out. It was in India, it was all over Africa, and we basically stamped it out. And we said, well, there's nothing we can do with those people. If you're a cannibal, you will continue to be a cannibal. We know this. So it's like, well, we just need to wipe them out and bring in people who aren't and let them have the land because they're decent people and let them grow off it. And so everyone colours it, but there was more slaves sold the other way. There was more Europeans sold into the North African slave trade than African slaves sold in the transatlantic slave trade.
And I would need to correct you on that. That's not quite true. There's always been more slaves. I mean, over the same period, the Northern African Barbary pirates, they stole about 1.25 million white Christian Europeans. It was horrendous. But the point we need to make is there's more African slaves today than at any other time in the history of mankind. So why are we to blame for the transatlantic slave trade? Every slave that was sold into the transatlantic slave trade was captured by a black African, enslaved by a black African, and sold to go to a foreign country as a slave by a black African. All we were the captains of boats that took him over, which was still wrong, but most of the blame of the transatlantic slave trade needs to be placed upon the rulers of those African countries who are still dealing in slaves today.
Yeah, it was like there was a guy in Newcastle the other day shouting about how his ancestors built Newcastle, which the Geordies found highly amusing. I mean, my uncles used to come after work. My ancestors came after work and built the cathedrals by hand, 150 years ago, for nothing. So it is quite funny. And it was called Newcastle because William built a Newcastle there.
It's quite amazing that these black immigrants think they built cities in England when you look at their ancestral home countries.
They've been in mud huts
where
for 5,000 years.
Absolutely nothing.
Well, not only
absolutely
that.
nothing.
Yeah, not only that, this guy had an African accent, which means he wasn't sold into slavery because it wasn't a Caribbean accent.
Yeah.
And which means his family probably benefited from slavery at some point. So it's just completely mental. And I think we need to just start pushing back on a lot of this. And there's two methodologies. There's one that you have to push back on things and correct things. But there's also the mindset that it is onwards to Rome we march, and certain things just have to be pushed aside. Like you can just, like Rory Stewart, you could just get lost, mate. When you're done, we're off. And there needs to be this confidence and this vigor that I think it needs to be a cross-cultural approach. There's things that we're missing in this. We're missing a good music scene that is centered around this. We're missing good video, good film, good graphics, good art. And I think you start getting these things in and it starts to feel healthy and vigorous. And I think one of the things that probably did America great guns was Nashville. Nashville stayed in that place. Yes, there is woke Nashville, but a lot of Nashville's still very old-fashioned and traditional. A man's a man, a woman's a woman, and they enjoy it that way. And from that, they were allowed to sing about beer and boots and birds, essentially. And it grew, it grew from there. That was never going to go. And ironically, the south of America was populated by the Southern Scottish, the Northern Irish, and the Northern English. We are the South. The North of England is the South. And I do think that the pushback will probably come more from Northern minds, because after working in London for a couple of years and seeing how bad the South is, the South is knackered. Around the outsides in the rural areas, it's not so bad, but you can see they're trying to break it with the immigrants. But the North hasn't, once you get past Manchester and into York and up into Northumberland, it's not the same. It's still England. It's still England. And we have that, that very plain speaking tone that you have in your book. And your book is incredibly direct. If you're weak-minded and you read that book, you're going to go like, whoa, because it basically says, this is the problem. You're the problem. Get off your ass and fix it, which is a very Northern thing. And I speak to a lot of people out here. I work in hospitality, so I meet a lot of people from all over the country. But I speak to a lot of people just out and about, mechanics, doctors. They're all saying exactly the same thing, and they're all fed up, and they will not tolerate what happened down south. They'll come looking for them. One of the biggest sort of paedophile hunting gangs we have is Geordies. We'll go out, they'll hunt them down. They've been doing it for decades because the police just weren't effective. And I do think we need to start pushing back. We need to start creating this culture. We can't wait for America to do it. That's wrong. That's like, get off your... we've got some of the greatest music that's ever been written. Purcell, absolutely wondrous. Tallis, Bird, Elgar. These are absolute Holst. Like, we've got some of the greatest music, some of the greatest artists, some of the greatest architecture, some of the greatest literature. Byron is just beautiful. It's all there. Everything is there. If you dig into that cultural root and say, I am going to typify and embody my nation. And I know it's a small thing, but I took the conscious decision years ago to start wearing tweeds all the time. My style icon is probably Caleb from Clarkson's Farm and Nigel Farage, because it's an Englishman's uniform. And I'll tell you, the superficial impact it has on foreigners, particularly from the Middle East, can't be understated. They immediately respect you. It's weird.
Do you know why I don't think I discussed it in the book. It was too complicated. One of the things I think happened to us, what is happening to us and why we allow all this to happen, is because deep down inside, even the woke idiots in this country and the elite, deep down inside, we all know we're better than everybody else around the world.
Absolutely.
And they're ashamed of that, knowing we're better than everybody else. And this promotion of other people's cultures, allowing immigration, is them trying to lessen that guilt that they know the English are the best people, the most productive people, the people who have changed the world the most, the people who created science, the modern world, and they're ashamed of that because they feel they should be equal to everybody else around the world. And it's guilt. But there should be no guilt. We are the greatest people ever to exist in the greatest country ever to exist.
Absolutely. I think there's a book called The Naked Communist written by Leon Skousen, who was an FBI agent in the 50s. And he basically infiltrated a lot of the communist networks in Hollywood. And in the book, he's going through communiques from the 1930s from the Communist Internationale, as it was then. And their asserted goal in the 1930s was to take over Great Britain, collapse the empire, and destroy the nuclear family. They weren't bothered about anyone else. They were coming for the Anglos. Adolf Hitler said in the war that the greatest thing ever to happen to civilization was the British Empire. And he even said, look, if we can sort this out and have a peace treaty, I will pledge the entire German military machine to the protection of the British Empire. Right, so even our adversaries recognized that we were the greatest thing and this is why I say this story is the Anglo story. Like this is what it is. Like, we are still, and And I would make, I have a fondness for ancient China. I think the ancient Chinese civilization was just incredible. It was unbroken for 5,000 years. So, but I would say that maybe that was the greatest thing that ever happened in certain parts, but certainly for the West and for the rest of the world that China didn't touch, nothing comes close to the English. Nothing comes close to the English nation. And we need to recognize this and teach this to our kids. It's like, no, you're English. Do you not realize what that means? The Englishman is a king. This is the divine sovereign. So even Tacitus recognized this. Even Caesar recognized this. There's something in the Germanics where it was the first among equals. Yes, each man was sovereign. And this thing about this sovereignty, this you elevate sovereignty to such a degree, people mistake sovereignty with selfishness. And it's not. It's like, there is my kingdom. I'm going to expand my kingdom outwards. And my kingdom is going to push to its furthest reach. Now, your kingdom might not be stable, but if my kingdom pushes up against yours, you can rest upon mine and rectify your own kingdom. And then everyone begins to do that. And suddenly it's like an arch, the keystone in an arch, everything leans against that keystone. That keystone is the individual sovereignty that the English have, that English liberty. That is American liberty. That was an English virtue. It is ours. No other nation had this concept. It's an Anglo concept. It's ours. It was enshrined in all of our constitutional documents. Washington was an Englishman. He was a Geordie. He was an Englishman. He took it to the United States. It was like a seed. If you want to look, zoom out. I'm a very spiritual man, so I see it from that point of view. The Creator took this thing, this incredible gift, and he planted the seed in America to keep it safe because he knew England was going to hit troubled waters. And we have hit troubled waters. But that spirit, that what I call the King's spirit, that's in us. And when I read your book, that brings that out with a sharp slap.
You remind me of something that I wrote in my book. I think you posted it yesterday online, and it's the fact that I don't want to hear Englishmen moaning, because to moan, it means you don't have agency, and you only moan upwards. You have to moan with people who are in charge, who are better than you. Englishmen have no one above them. So that's why Englishmen shouldn't be moaning, should be fixing problems, because there's no one sat above an Englishman.
No, absolutely. And I think, I've always kind of I've always felt that people complain, you're arrogant, you're too confident. No, I'm English. And I know I'm English, and I know what that means. I know that there is nothing to compare. Rome was an incredible military machine, but they weren't Englishmen, and they didn't live, and Tacitus, again, I say this because I reviewed it recently, Tacitus recognized that the Germanics lived differently. They had chastity, they had virtue, they had incredibly principled lives. We have this thing where we've progressed from being like ignorant apes. But when the further back through history you go, you see the morality goes like this, and then the intelligence goes like this. Society hadn't progressed to the point where we could manufacture complex metals and compounds and things like this. But these people were incredible, and we've taken that here and we've put it in this land, and you can see things where the Normans would write about, don't lie to a Saxon. Don't lie to an Anglo-Saxon, because they hate nothing more than being lied to. And don't try and confuse him with flowery language, because he will literally strike you down with directness. And this is the English thing. Alfred's rules, his laws, do not lie. Do not speak unjustly to another. Like, you look at the foundation that the country was built on, which was a divine inspiration from Alfred, and it's like, yes, that's what it means to be English. It's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege. And from the English, yes, the Americans are our children, as are the Aussies and the Canadians and everyone else. So
and
yes.
Go on. I was going to say, and then if you look at America, same with New Zealand and Australia and Canada, when the New World was discovered by the Spanish and, the Portuguese went, they took the good lands. They took South America and Latin America. That's where all the silver and gold was. That's where there was civilization. North America, meaning the US and Canada, they were nomadic tribes. There was no culture there. There was no civilizations there. There was barren lands roll on a couple of 100 years. English culture has now turned America and Canada into first world countries. Same with Australia and New Zealand. Nothing there, barren lands. But the rich parts of America, you know, they're all now at best second world countries. Some are in third world countries. That's what English culture does. It turns barren lands into paradise.
It's like a high culture. It is. I don't mean that in a haughty way. You have to recognize things for what they are. I think I knew we would be, but I think we're in almost perfect alignment there. So the big question is, and I ask this of everybody, what do we do? Where do we go forward? We've discussed small things, but there needs to be something more. And I guess I'm speaking more to those of us who are putting our neck out into this sphere. And I do come back to this thing of we either hang together or we hang. And I think there's been some attempt at that. I think Mr. Robinson, who unfortunately is languishing at His Majesty's pleasure at the moment, which I think is unjust, I think he's done quite a lot towards that. But there does seem to be that we need to have this sort of unified, this tacit agreement that we're all moving in the same direction, whether we're sat on different parts of the bus or not is irrelevant. And there needs to be like almost a coming together and a celebration of what we're all doing. Would you agree?
I would, but we're not going to get that. It's how do we get something like that as close as possible without actually getting that, because we're not going to get that. It's, for me, for people like us, it's all about pressure. It's putting more and more pressure on the government, on our institutions, and trying to open up the eyes of the general public. Because anybody involved in this fight at the moment, none of us are Mandela, none of us are Thatcher, none of us are going to change the country. What's going to change the country will be the mass movement of people when they've had enough. That always changes the country. It's never an individual. We may think it was Thatcher, but Thatcher brought a lot of people with her when things started improving. So, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure. I'm not that clever to be able to work out definitely what the plan is. I just know that it will have to involve personal responsibility. It will have to involve Englishmen and women doing their bit. And if their bit might be a minutiae, but do you know what? If you add up 60 million people doing a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, that's a tsunami of change.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to get people to realise is doing nothing is not an option anymore. You need to do what you can do, and only you can work out what you can do. It's not for me to tell you what to do. You need to work that out as an Englishman and woman, and then you need to make sure you do that. And if everybody else does that, change will come. We're in a bit of a different situation to other countries in Europe and America, because we've had 14 years of a socialist conservative party, and we still think that they were on the right. They weren't on the right. They were just a continuation of Blair. They were socialists. And then we rejected them, rightly so. And now we've got an even more socialist government. So we've sort of messed up a little bit there, that, you know, it should have been 14 years of a socialist government. Then we could have got a right-wing government, but we didn't do it that way. This government will fail. This government will not last 5 years. I guarantee that this government will fall and crumble. The government that replaces it, I don't know who that's going to be. But will the Tories have time to sort themselves out? Well, they won't for the next couple of years. Kemi Badenoch will not run in the next election as leader. She's just got a continuation of what we had for 14 years. Will reform explode onto the scene? We'll find that out at the next council elections in May. Have they reached a critical point? Will they start taking councils and getting hundreds and hundreds of councillors? We don't know. And for people who have got a problem with Reform UK, and I've got a little bit of a problem with Reform UK, what I say to them is, who else are you going to vote for? This is a journey to a final destination. It might take you to get a bus there then a taxi, then walk the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And if Reform UK had a bus to
Yes,
take us part of
absolutely.
the way there, get on the Reform bus. The second you don't like that bus anymore, get off the bus. But just because they're not perfect doesn't mean they're not the vehicle at the moment. But for me at the moment, they are. That's the only vehicle available at the moment. Jump on the Reform bus and let them take us part of the way. And if they then change their policies or don't keep in touch with the people, we can get off the bus.
Yes, we've got to
somebody
stop.
else then.
Yes.
Somebody else will provide a taxi. And let's
100%.
use that taxi then to carry on the journey.
Yeah, we've got to stop this tribal thing that we fell into in the 70s and 80s. It's nuts. Somebody accused me the other day of trying to split the Reform vote, and I went, with what? What are you going to split it with? There's nothing to split it with. However, they need external pressure. You've got to put pressure on. Politicians only react to the will of the public. Look, why did Nigel run? Because of pressure. People put pressure on him outside and appealed to his compassion, and he went, okay, I'll run.
I think he ran for a different reason altogether from that.
Well,
I think he didn't want to run. I think they called the early election. He had plans about the Trump campaign and stuff like that. And he realised when he said no, he realised that's the end of me. If I don't stand now on this election, I will never, ever, ever be able to stand again in the UK. The people will never forgive me for banning them at this election. He was forced into it. I'm glad he ran, and I'm glad he won. But for him, it's now or never.
So, but that goes back to my point that you can see that his entire rhetoric, his style changed when certain donors came on board. And I think the only way we will hold him to his word is through external pressure. I think Trump will put external pressure on him, but we need to, which is why when the first United Kingdom march happened, I thought, we need this. There has to be an external group that is putting pressure on the government that has a huge political sway, almost like a union, but not a union. Can't be a union, but it has to be a grassroots affiliation of, we're watching you. Our politicians need to know that we are watching them and holding them accountable. They are our employees. So I do think you need that. But I also think, well, if he gets us to the next one, then that's fine. And then whoever gets to the next one, it doesn't matter. We've got to do this where we either change our constitution, so it's more like the United States where the leader has more power, or we go back the other way and start making the monarchy function properly. Because the monarchies should, all these bills that were passed since the 50s, they tried to pass them in previous monarchs, but the monarchs vetoed them. No, you can't do it. It's against the people. You can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. Suddenly, Elizabeth comes in, and I think they just filled her full of crap. And went, you're just a figurehead, darling. Sit down. You're a woman. And she never got the chance to exercise fully what her forefathers had done.
Yeah.
And we're in the state that we're in because most of these statutes and laws that have been, the thousands and tens of thousands that have been passed since the war shouldn't have been passed. And you can see everything since the 20s. Go on, sorry?
Yeah, I think if she'd have vetoed anything, we would be a republic now.
You think that they would have gone that far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the monarchy knows that they're figurehead only, and they've got an emergency button if we ever get to a stage where we're building concentration camps or hunting Jews or putting black people against walls and shooting them or bombing cities. It would have to get that level of craziness for the monarch to veto something, because I think they know the second they veto anything, it's the end of the monarchy.
Yeah, I would just marshal the forces if it was me. I'd just go in and I'd scorch earth a lot. But I'm from Newcastle, so there you go. Yeah. we favour that type of action.
Yeah. But again, let's go back to how this conversation started. Why are we relying on the monarchy to solve our problems when we're Englishmen and Englishwomen? If we went out and voted and we did what we needed to do, we wouldn't need the monarchy or someone else to solve our problems out.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. And there is this, we've kind of fell into Englishmen in the past didn't have this feeling. They didn't have this feeling of this is for another. The only thing you can maybe say is when we had the Socratic democracy where the educated voted, and to be fair, the country rang better, we would say, well, that's up to them, but we're the mob and we'll hold them accountable if they don't do it. So there was always an agency. We always had agency, and the agency was, we will turn up 20,000 strong on your doorstep, pull your gate down and rip you out of the house. That was our agency. And as we've kind of, oh, well, now you've got full democracy, you don't need to do that. You can vote, so you don't need to go and do that. But it's been like a weakening of the system all the way through. It's gently death by 1,000 cuts. And I think Southport showed, look, when you take away a man's voice, all he has left is violence. And there's one thing that, and I don't think anyone banks on this, the Englishmen are the hobbits, right? We are the quiet man. And you want to beware of sending the quiet man to war, because all he wants is a quiet life, because he knows if he flips that button, he becomes something else that he will never be again. And this is what they need to be wary of with the English, because above all else, the English are excellent at war. We're excellent at fighting. We like fighting. The football lads show you that. And we're excellent at war because we're highly intelligent and physically very capable. So they need to be very, very careful. And I would say that they far rather start listening. And I seen this in 2014 when they started rubbishing the white man van. I think it was Emily Thornberry. And I thought, oh, you need to be very careful there, because what happens on the council estates now happens in Parliament tomorrow. You need to be very, very careful, because they are the mass population of the country. And if you try and denigrate them, these lads are hard as nails and they've got nothing to lose. They've grown up without fathers. They've grown up in broken homes. All they've known is violence. These lads are as hard as nails. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do against them? Because they'll just, look, I've been in a 200-person nightclub brawl with a bunch of gypsies, right? Gypsies are like weebles. They wobble, but they don't go down, right? They bounce back up. We've got housing estates full of kids like that. You hit them, they get straight back up. What are you going to do? You're going to have to turn to something incredibly brutal and horrible. And if they don't start listening, and I guess this kind of brings us full circle, Southport has changed everything. Now, the response has also changed everything, because everyone's went, whoa, you're not right in the head, mate. And that's what everyone's thought. This guy's a loon. And he is a loon. And now it's come out that he's lied. Which, ironically, I was thinking, I wonder if you're going to go back and revise your book in a year or so. Because, yes, he's lied. And he knew at the time that they were all right. And that's it. That's not going back in the bottle. And all they'll do now is they'll just sit and they'll wait for the 100% establishment-proved justification. When it comes, they'll just go, yeah, but this time we're right.
Yep. And wait until the next atrocity, when they're all on the streets again, this time knowing they're right because they were right last time and they got lied to. I foresee a lot more violence coming down our path, because Starmer won't change, this Labour Party won't change, and they've only got a heavy hand for public problems like that. They will come down hard, but we've had a taste of that now. And again, that's why Trump winning was important.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So let's wrap this up then. Give me a positive forward for all the young men and women out there who they maybe can't see things the way we see them. And I'm incredibly hopeful and optimistic and super proud to be British. And I think we need to give some of these people a bit of a leg up, because some of them see it being black. What can you say to them to give them a bit of hope?
My hope would be, we've been in worse situations than this, and we've always come out victorious. Everyone thought we were finished in 1939. People thought we were finished when Napoleon was planning to invade England. Same with the Spanish Armada, just off the coast, and we destroyed them. We've been in worse situations than this. This only seems worse because you're living through it. But the history written about this time will be, this was just a blip. Do not be disheartened, and because you're English, and that means something. And if someone like Donald Trump, who's had a decade of negativity thrown at him, racist, misogynist, Hitler, fascist, all the things you're being called, and he can become president of the United States because the people don't believe these labels anymore now. So stop being afraid of hurty words. Stop being afraid of being called names, because the people who are calling you these things are just trying to control you. And an Englishman doesn't have a master An Englishman has no one sat above them. So these people are nobodies. Sort your own life out. Take responsibility for yourself, your family, your community, your country, and everything else will start fitting into place. But until you sort yourself out as an Englishman, an Englishwoman, this country will not get better. Because we can't fix this country if we have to start by fixing you. So don't be a problem, fix yourself, and then we're halfway to fixing this fantastic country of ours.
Excellent. Well said. And look, we'll have to have that pint, okay?
Yeah.
Definitely. We'll see if we can get some more Northern talking heads together, and we'll apply a full afternoon of Northern logic with some ale. But yes, absolutely wonderful, Nick. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Where can everybody find you?
They can find me everywhere, on social media, everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, at Nick Buckley MBE. Find me on YouTube. I must put 3-4 videos out a day. I've got podcasts on there. Again, that's Nick Buckley MBE. I do writing on Substack, Nick Buckley MBE. And if you've liked anything I've said today, buy my book, only available on Amazon, and then leave a review. And even if you don't buy it, leave a review anyway, because the far left trolls are attacking the book online.
Yeah, it's an excellent book. It really is excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.